The Roys have everything. Billions of dollars, private jets, penthouse apartments, political influence, access to presidents, CEOs, celebrities, and almost anyone else they want. They have enough money to make ordinary problems disappear not just for themselves, but for their children, their grandchildren, and generations they will never live to meet, and yet, almost nobody in succession seems happy. Kendall wants the company. Shiv wants to be chosen. Roman wants to be taken seriously. Connor wants to matter. And Logan, the man who already possesses everything his children are fighting for, somehow still wants more. That is the strange paradox at the heart of succession. How can people who have everything live as though something is always missing? At first the answer seems obvious. They are greedy. They are spoiled. They are billionaires who have lost all sense of proportion. And there is certainly truth in that. But it doesn't explain everything, because if money were really what they wanted, the conflict would make very little sense. Any one of the Roy children could walk away. They could sell what they own, disappear from the company, and live a life of almost unimaginable luxury without ever working another day. But they don't. They keep coming back. Back to the meetings. Back to the negotiations. Back to the betrayals. Back to Logan. Again and again, they willingly return to the same environment that humiliates them, divides them, and makes them miserable. Why? Maybe because the Roys aren't really fighting over money. Maybe they're not even fighting over Waystar. Maybe they're fighting over something none of them can ever permanently possess. And nearly 200 years before succession, one philosopher described why human beings can spend their entire lives chasing something, finally get it, and discover that it still isn't enough. His name was Schopenhauer, and his answer is much darker than simply saying that money cannot buy happiness. Look at the world the Roys inhabit. Helicopters carry them over traffic. Drivers wait outside buildings. Assistants anticipate their needs. Their apartments overlook cities most people can barely afford to visit. They attend private events, negotiate billion-dollar deals, and move through spaces designed to remind everyone else that these people belong to another class of existence. But there is something strange about the luxury in succession. The more luxurious the environment becomes, the less comfortable the people inside it seem. A magnificent dining room becomes the setting for humiliation. A private jet becomes a place for anxiety. A beautiful wedding becomes a battlefield. A family gathering becomes a negotiation. Even affection begins to feel transactional. The Roys have solved many of the material problems that dominate ordinary life. Yet they remain trapped by problems money cannot seem to touch. That matters. Because when someone has very little, wanting more is easy to understand. More money can mean food, housing, medicine, education, safety, freedom. But when someone already has billions, another $100 million cannot possibly transform everyday life in the same way. At some point, money stops functioning primarily as money. It becomes something else. A measurement, a symbol, a scoreboard, and that is where the question becomes more interesting. When Kendall says he wants the company, what does he believe will happen if he gets it? When Shiv wants to be named successor, what exactly does she imagine that title will prove? When Roman desperately tries to demonstrate that he can handle responsibility, whose judgment is he really trying to change? And then there is Logan. The children can at least tell themselves that happiness is waiting at the top. Logan is already there. He built the empire. He controls the company. He has the money. He has the influence. He has the room full of people waiting for him to speak. If getting what you want is supposed to end desire, why does Logan Roy still want anything at all? Schopenhauer believed the answer was hidden inside the structure of human desire itself. For him, human beings are not primarily calm, rational creatures who occasionally happen to want things. Wanting is much closer to the center of our existence. We are driven by what he called the will, a ceaseless striving that expresses itself through appetite, ambition, sexuality, competition, survival, status, possession, and countless other forms of desire. We want, and because we want, we experience lack. Think about something you have wanted intensely: a promotion, a relationship, a certain amount of money, recognition, a house, a degree, success. Maybe you imagined that reaching it would change something fundamental. Then you achieved it. For a moment, perhaps it did. There was satisfaction, relief, pride, maybe even happiness. And then something happened. The extraordinary became ordinary. The new salary became your salary. The new house became your house. The achievement became part of your biography, and slowly, almost invisibly, another desire appeared. For Schopenhauer, this was not an accident. It was the mechanism. We want something. We struggle toward it. We suffer because we do not have it. Then, if we are fortunate, we obtain it. And for a brief period, the wanting stops, but only briefly. Soon there is something else. Another goal, another comparison, another insecurity, another reason why life will finally feel complete once one more thing happens. Desire promises a destination, but often delivers another starting line, and that makes the Roy family fascinating. They are not exceptions to this mechanism. They are an exaggerated demonstration of it. Most of us can imagine that perhaps we would finally relax if financial pressure disappeared. The Roys have already conducted that experiment. Financial pressure has disappeared. The desire remains. Their wealth has removed many external limits, but it has not removed the internal machinery that keeps producing new wants. And nobody demonstrates this more clearly than Logan. Logan does not need another deal to eat better tomorrow. He does not need another victory to afford a larger home. He does not need more status in order to be taken seriously. He has already won the game by almost every conventional measure. And still he behaves as though every room contains another battle that must be won. Another person must be tested. Another opponent must be defeated. Another child must prove themselves. Another deal must be made. Another threat must be neutralized, because perhaps victory was never really a destination for Logan. Perhaps victory is simply the condition in which he knows how to exist. If he stops fighting, something much more frightening might happen. He might have to ask what all the fighting was for. What happens to a man who has built his identity around conquest when there is nothing left to conquer? Who is Logan Roy without the empire? Without the negotiations? Without the enemies? Without people waiting for his approval? There is an irony here. Logan appears to own everything around him, but in another sense, the empire owns Logan. He cannot simply enjoy what he built because maintaining, expanding, and defending it has become inseparable from who he is. The object of desire has become the structure of his life. And then Logan does something even more destructive. He teaches his children to desire the same way. Throughout succession, Logan repeatedly offers his children the possibility of being chosen. And then he withdraws it. He brings them closer, then pushes them away. He praises them, then humiliates them. He creates hope, then destabilizes it. The position at the top of Waystar is never merely a job. It is always close enough to feel attainable and uncertain enough to remain irresistible. And this is crucial because desire often becomes strongest not when something is impossible, but when it is almost possible. Maybe Kendall will be chosen. Maybe Shiv will be chosen. Maybe Roman will finally prove himself. Maybe this conversation will be different. Maybe this time Logan will mean it. Maybe this time he will look at one of them and say, in whatever language he is capable of using, "You are the one." That possibility keeps them orbiting him. And this is where succession becomes much sadder than a story about wealthy people fighting over a corporation. Because beneath the acquisitions, board votes, betrayals, and strategy meetings, the Roy children may not really be competing for a company at all. They may be competing for their father. Think about what becoming Logan's successor would mean emotionally. It would not simply mean becoming CEO. It would mean being chosen. Dad picked me. Dad trusts me. Dad thinks I am capable. Dad believes I am worthy. Dad finally sees me. Once you see the company this way, much of succession changes. Kendall's obsession becomes more than professional ambition. He has spent years trying to become his father and defeat his father at the same time. He wants Logan's throne, but he also wants something much more primitive. Recognition from the man sitting on it. Every attempt to overthrow Logan carries a strange contradiction. Kendall wants to prove that he no longer needs his father's approval by accomplishing the one thing that might finally earn his father's approval. Even rebellion keeps him emotionally tied to the person he is rebelling against. Shiv expresses the same hunger differently. She wants to believe she is independent, intelligent, different from her brothers. Different, perhaps, from the entire ecosystem Logan created. But the moment Logan suggests that she could be the one, the gravitational pull of his approval becomes extraordinarily difficult to resist. Why? Because being chosen would prove more than professional competence. It would resolve an old question. Do you really believe in me? Do you think I belong here? Am I as capable as the sons you spent years preparing for this world? Roman may reveal the emotional mechanism most nakedly. He hides vulnerability behind jokes, provocation, cruelty, and sexual humor. But underneath that performance is an almost painful sensitivity to Logan's judgment. Roman wants to be taken seriously by a father who has trained him to expect humiliation. And because affection and cruelty have become entangled, even negative attention can function as a form of connection. That is one of the bleakest elements of the Roy family. They have learned to interpret proximity to Logan as love, even when that proximity hurts them. Connor stands slightly outside the central succession battle, but his desires reveal another version of the same wound. He wants relevance, recognition, a place in history, to matter in a family where attention itself has always been scarce. Different children, different strategies, the same emotional economy, and suddenly the tragedy becomes clear. Logan gave his children almost everything money could provide, but he made the thing they needed most feel permanently conditional. Love, approval, recognition, the feeling that their value did not depend on winning. The tragedy of the Roy children is not that their father gave them nothing. It is that he gave them almost everything except the one thing they actually needed. And once that missing thing becomes psychologically attached to Waystar, the company becomes almost impossible to abandon. Walking away no longer means leaving a corporation. It means surrendering the possibility that one day the wound might finally close. This is why billions are not enough. Because the billions were never what the hunger was asking for. But this creates an uncomfortable question. Suppose Logan had chosen one of them completely. No manipulation, no reversal, no test. Imagine that he had looked at Kendall or Shiv or Roman and said, "It is yours. You are my successor. I trust you. I am proud of you." Would that have been enough? We want to believe it would. We want to believe there is some final sentence, some final achievement, some moment of recognition capable of repairing decades of insecurity. But Schopenhauer gives us reason to doubt it. Because desire does not simply disappear when its object is obtained. Often it reorganizes itself. Kendall might become CEO and immediately need to prove that he was a better CEO than Logan. Shiv might be chosen and then become consumed by whether the board respected her. Roman might receive his father's approval and begin fearing the moment he could lose it, the prize could change hands while the deeper insecurity remained untouched. This is why Logan's use of uncertainty is so powerful. He doesn't need to give the children what they want. He only needs to keep them believing that satisfaction is one victory away, one conversation away, one deal away, one demonstration of loyalty away, one humiliation endured away. Almost, there may be no more dangerous word in the emotional universe of succession, because a definitive rejection can eventually force someone to leave, but almost keeps hope alive. And hope, when attached to an unhealthy desire, can become another kind of prison. It also helps explain why the siblings struggle to love one another without competition entering the room. Kendall, Shiv, and Roman can be remarkably tender with one another. There are moments when the corporate masks fall away, and they become what they always were, beneath the wealth. Siblings shaped by the same family, trying to survive the same father. They joke, they protect each other. They understand one another in ways outsiders cannot. But the competition never disappears for long, because if the prize is not simply a company, but proof of paternal love, then every sibling becomes a threat. If Logan chooses you, maybe that means he did not choose me. If you are worthy, maybe I am not. Love becomes scarce, approval becomes scarce, recognition becomes scarce, and scarcity creates competition. This may be Logan's most devastating inheritance. Not the company, not the money, not the shares, the belief that love must be won. And then something happens that should end the game. Logan dies. Suddenly, the central figure around whom their desires have revolved is gone. There is no final conversation waiting, no future reconciliation, no last opportunity to prove themselves, no definitive moment when Logan will finally explain what he thought of them. Death turns uncertainty into permanence, and yet the struggle continues. Waystar is no longer simply something Logan owned. It is the world he built. To control it is, in some sense, to inherit him. To lose it is to lose one of the last remaining structures through which the children can continue their relationship with him. But now there is an even crueler problem. The person whose approval gave the prize its deepest meaning is no longer there to give it. What happens to desire when the person whose approval made that desire meaningful disappears? This is where the final movement of succession becomes philosophically devastating. The game can continue. The board can vote. The company can be sold. Titles can change. Money can move from one account to another. There can still be winners and losers, but the original emotional promise can no longer be fulfilled. Imagine Kendall becoming CEO after Logan's death. He could sit in the office, control the company, occupy the position he spent so much of his life chasing. But Logan could never see him there. Logan could never say he had been wrong. He could never say you were ready or you did it. The same is true for Shiv and Roman. The object remains. The meaning has vanished, and perhaps this is why the ending feels so empty. Not merely sad, empty, because after all the movement, all the betrayals, all the strategies, all the promises, all the money, all the desire, we finally confront the possibility that there was never a version of the outcome capable of giving these people what they were actually seeking. This is one of Schopenhauer's darkest insights. We often assume suffering comes from not getting what we want, and much of it does. But getting what we want does not permanently solve the problem either. If desire is ceaseless, satisfaction is temporary. Succession exposes a different danger, asking an external achievement to resolve an internal question it was never designed to answer. No salary can permanently tell you that you matter. No job title can guarantee that you are worthy of love. They have everything, but everything is an external measurement. Enough is an internal experience. And perhaps that is the question succession leaves for the rest of us. What have you told yourself you must achieve before you are allowed to feel satisfied? Whose approval are you still trying to earn? What victory do you imagine will finally prove your worth? And how much of your life are you willing to sacrifice before asking whether the thing you are chasing was ever capable of telling you that you have enough?